Thank you for tuning into this episode of Profit Insights. Now, if you thought that aerospace and aviation as an industry is restricted to only select companies and select countries around the world, I think this episode and this show will give you insights around the rapid strides that India as a nation and Indian companies have taken in this particular ecosystem. And to talk about this deep dive is the team from ValueQuest. Ravi Dharamshi, founder and CIO, Aniket Dharamshi, MD and fund manager at ValueQuest, as well as Arvind Anant Narayanan, fund manager and director of investments at ValueQuest. Gentlemen, all three of you, thank you so much for taking the time out. And this is the second deep dive that we are doing, and I'm so glad we are doing it together.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The pleasure is all ours.
Thank you for having us.
No, trust me, the pleasure is ours, and looking forward to the insights over the next 25, 27 minutes. Ravi, I'll start with you. And I've seen this as a trend that you guys at ValueQuest are thinking of giga trends, of newer trends, trying to invest early. How did this aerospace industry come into being?
So, you know what? We are constantly looking for trends. We are tracking them on a regular basis. We keep looking for inflection points. We are tracking, the technology curve, the cost curve. We are tracking the regulatory shifts, behavioral shifts, supply chain shifts, which way the capital and talent is flowing. All those kind of things give us an insight into which trend we believe are going to reach that inflection point. And this is one trend we believe has reached that inflection point. And we'll talk obviously more about it, why we believe that this has reached an inflection point. So whenever a trend reaches that inflection point, that is generally an explosion in the profit pool. And people have never tracked it. You not only as an investor, but even the companies present in the sector, they usually underestimate the kind of demand explosion that can happen, and that leads to creation of a huge profit pool, which is captured by few companies. And that's what our mantra has been in identifying where to invest. So along with, of course, identifying great companies, we want to identify the themes that we want to invest in. And that's where this particular space comes in.
Got it. Aniket, before a theme reaches an inflection point, there's a lot of work that goes beneath it, right? And no one in the last 15, 20 years would have thought of India making rapid strides in aerospace, which is different from defense in that sense, right? So how did this happen? A very brief thing on the timelines of what has happened in the aerospace industry and where is India currently and how did it reach there?
See, the inflection point of this industry actually took place because of COVID-19. What happened is that the primary OEMs and tier ones in this industry, and the OEMs being the 5 large aerospace companies, which is Boeing and Airbus, the duopoly on the aircraft manufacturing side, and the 3 engine makers, GE, Rolls-Royce and Pratt & Whitney, essentially faced a lot of challenges post-COVID. They did not expect that the demand would come back in such a way, in the way that it did. And it was estimated that passenger demand would not come back until 26, 27.
Right.
Which actually came back in 22, 23. Driven by demand from passengers, essentially.
Yeah.
Came back much faster than anyone could have anticipated. And that is why this industry took off in a way that nobody thought it would. The problem was with the supply chain and the aging population. Essentially, the people who were working in the factories of these OEMs did not come back to work post-COVID-19. And because they did not come back, there was a supply chain constraint because there was not much outsourcing in these industries. And there were backlogs that were building up. Today, as you know, there's 10 to 12 years of backlog.
Yeah, I saw that in the note, yes.
So to cater to this, they had to move production from their own in-house facilities to getting these parts from other suppliers, and the outsourcing trend began in this industry, and that is how India got to participate in the sector.
Okay, so it was a trend building up, COVID accelerated this trend, is what you're trying to say?
Yes.
Okay, and where does this, Arvind, where does this trend take us, if you will? I mean, one is where does an industry move towards, and two is how does a country wherein this was never the talk of town participate in something like this?
True. Let's take a step back. Around the COVID period, as the Indian companies have started to get into this ecosystem, let's not forget that manufacturing as a theme has also been growing in India. Precision engineering and the ability to make parts to very close tolerances, the ability to make parts first time right, which are all cornerstones of the aerospace industry, both civil and military, but we are speaking of civilian aerospace here, have grown. That's the very first thing. Second, over this period of time, as Aniket was just alluding to a moment earlier, a lot of the engineering talent pool in the ecosystem of these OEMs, which is basically Europe and America, which was essentially the cradle of civil aviation, these talent pools have started drying up. Whereas in India, we do have the engineering talent. Costs are competitive. People are available for scaling up manufacturing at a rate which is not possible in these OEMs. And India has been more koshered, if one were to use that term in this context, about IP. A lot of this civilian IP can be dual-purposed into military use, and it has indeed happened in other geographies. So with all of this, there is significant confidence in the OEMs to also come to India. Now, going forward, where this will lead is that the Indian OEMs, the OEMs who are coming to India, forgive the slip-up, will essentially increase the work share to these Indian companies which have partnered with them at tier 2, tier 3 levels. And from a company perspective, they would like to go from initially built to blueprint solutions all the way up to building full products which they can then supply to the OEMs, particularly things like heat exchanger solutions, tubes, fluid handling solutions, instead of individual parts like, say, a pipe or a duct or a fastener. From there, to take several of these together, build a part and supply the part as a whole. Now, that would be the journey that will take place. Whether an Indian company will get into the tier 1 and become an OEM in the future, that's very far in the future as far as it's concerned.
But is that thinkable?
It is entirely thinkable. It is entirely thinkable, but we have to also be realistic here. China, for instance, has spent a lot of time and effort to put up their aircraft manufacturing industry, and COMAC is a success story of sorts. Brazil has Embraer, which is a big name in business jets and a piecemeal participant in the regional aircraft market. Despite their efforts, they have not been able to really get a toehold into the duopoly of Boeing and Airbus. Now, coming to COMAC, a lot of the systems underneath that airplane, be it hydraulics, be it the landing gear, etc., they still rely on the tier 1 suppliers of the global ecosystem the way Boeing and Airbus do. So it's an industry which has been built for globalization. It has been an industry of globalization, by globalization, for globalization. So where India will fit in, it will take time to move up the ladder, but at the present level itself, there is substantial wealth creation to be done.
Okay, interesting. Aniket, can I come to you? Because I think you guys as a house have said on other forums, in brief, in a conversation with me as well, that this is the window in time for Indian aerospace companies. What do you mean by that?
See, the way this ecosystem works is essentially there are orders which have come through for an aircraft, and then because of that said order, they have to set the supply chain in a way where there is so many parts that are involved in building an aeroplane. All of them have to arrive at the appropriate time into the facility, into the manufacturing facility, to then be assembled by an Airbus or a Boeing, or by any one of the engine manufacturers. Once you're embedded in the ecosystem with the certifications required, and you are actually a risk-sharing partner with the tier 1s or the OEMs, I'll address this point soon, you are a part of the assembly line, where your order book is defined, the delivery timelines for a set part are defined, and once they are what they are, you cannot back out of that commitment, because the entire aeroplane might be delayed because of a very small component that you have to provide. So essentially, if you get certified by a Boeing to make a certain part, and that part is going to go on an aircraft to be delivered in 2029, the order book for that is confirmed today. The delivery schedules for that are confirmed today. And your part has to reach Boeing's facility or Airbus's facility at a certain point in time, which is also confirmed. So once you're entrenched into the ecosystem, it will be very difficult for someone else to replace you. See, it's a very high entry barrier business. To break into any one of these OEMs or any one of these tier 1 suppliers, it's a 3 to 5 year period. You need to have certifications. You need to have first article inspections that you've completed. You need to have audits conducted, not just financially, but technically on all of the manufacturing equipment that you're using. And because of all of these stringent conditions in place, as lives are at stake, replacing someone who's entrenched in the ecosystem is very difficult. So once you've made that inroad with the OEM, you are essentially permanent in that system. So that is why it is a window and opportunity. People who are able to entrench themselves in this ecosystem over the next 5 to 7 years will then continue to, win orders and gain market share from players who have faltered. So over the next 5 to 10 years, this ecosystem will be defined for India, and from there, I don't think there'll be too many people after that who will be able to enter.
Okay.
So Niraj, if I have to just add point, what he quantified as a $20-30 billion kind of an annual opportunity for Indian companies. What has changed is that OEMs are now much more open to outsourcing some parts which they were manufacturing in-house. Second, they are looking for redundancy in terms of cost and supply base because their supply chain has been disrupted. And three, as Aniket mentioned earlier, that the talent pool is shrinking elsewhere, and India is one of the only place where the talent pool is growing. So in every which way, we are right at the cusp of realizing this opportunity that has opened up in this window of opportunity from the next 10 years point of view. And we will take away our share. Whether it is 5 or 15 is the only debate.
But that 5 or 15, Ravi, also is large enough, you guys are saying.
Oh, that's huge, because this is like $20 to $30 billion annual opportunity for companies that are from the size of revenue size for probably 100-200 crores to 1,000-1,500 crores at best at this stage. So when these companies, they will become, we are talking about these becoming at least 10x in size in next 10 years, and with high margins and long visibility. So whenever we look for an opportunity, what we look for is a large opportunity and a long runway. So both the things are present over here. One, the size of the opportunity, and second, visibility for 10-15 years, which is not very easy in most other sectors.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, Arvind, this entire ecosystem, high growth, etc. Are there now to both of you, right? Are there successful case studies of Indian companies already which have made a breakthrough and are now very large, traditionally relative to the past, very large partners of this OEMs, which is Airbus, Boeing, or some of the others?
Indeed. So coming to that point, there are companies which have started. So as we spoke previously, around 2020, 2021 is when a lot of the certification and onboarding of the Indian companies started taking place. Since then, there are companies in the listed universe. Azad Engineering is one example of it. They do turbine blades. GE is a large customer. In one of our private portfolio companies is Rungson's Aerospace. Again, they do tubes, ducts, fluid handling solutions, and thermal management systems, again embedded with GE, Honeywell, etc. On the ancillary side, of course, it's not directly linked to this, but there is Unimec Aerospace, for example. They provide tooling for the engine ecosystem for engine MRO side operations, again a listed company. So these are three that are relatively smaller. Then, of course, there are the large companies like Tata Aerospace, etc. They've been winning contracts with Boeing, with Airbus, both for military and civilian in recent times. So there have been several companies that have suddenly seen a rise in interest. That's one thing from the Indian perspective. And then if you look at outsourcing from a global perspective, which we were talking about, if we were to revisit that, we can see that till very recently for Pratt & Whitney, going out of Connecticut meant outsourcing. Okay. Now they're looking at India. For them, that's like Christopher Columbus going halfway across the world, and in such a short period of time. And Pratt has usually been one of the least, has been very cautious in terms of changes. Avant-garde in technology, cautious in changes. They've been doing this. GE and Collins have been far ahead. They're already in India, and they do have a lot of operations entrenched in India itself. So the whole ecosystem is waking up to India at this point of time.
Very interesting.
But to answer the second part of your question on whether they're significant partners to any one of these OEMs, they're not yet significant partners. We have to look at the scale up in this industry to understand that the kind of revenues that these companies make, they don't even cater to 1% or 2% of the ecosystem today. So over a period of time, as this market share increases from 1% or 2%, maybe 5% to maybe 10% is when we would be serious partners to any one of these OEMs. And I think the stage is set for that to happen over the next decade.
So if I might add, this is the start. This is the beginning of the growth. And we are at the birth of a profit pool, and growth is value at this stage.
Got it.
essentially.
Size is not the advantage here, you reckon?
No. It's engineering talent and capability along with the mindset of the promoter that is an advantage that India has. Also, we are respectful of IP. Ultimately, all IP in the aerospace ecosystem is owned by the OEMs.
Right.
And I consider the engine makers also to be OEMs, not tier ones. So with the IP relying with all of these, large companies, we feel that India has the right to win because we have and will continue to respect IP. So engineering talent, protection, respect that we have towards the IP that is coming from these players, and the capability to manufacture by having a cost structure that is beneficial compared to most other countries outside of China.
Essentially, earlier it used to be a different combination of airframe and an engine, but now it is not so the case. There is a combination of airframe and engine that the OEMs are manufacturing, so they are deeply entrenched with each other. So, and maybe you can elaborate more on it, either of you.
So essentially there used to be aircrafts, and we have been looking at the 737 family, which came up in the late 60s, early 70s, and that aircraft has been around for nearly 50 odd years now. It had engine options. Every airplane manufactured from the 60s, 70s, 80s, all the way up to the late 90s had different engines that you could buy along with the airplane. After the 2000s, maybe the mid 2000s, Arvind can elaborate on this, airframes have been developed in conjunction with the engine manufacturers. So if you buy an airplane, there is only one engine that you can buy along with it, because they're so deeply involved in the design element, which was not the case early on.
Right.
So we feel that this combination of the airframe manufacturer plus the engine manufacturer is to be considered an OEM, and what used to be a tier 1 supplier to the airframe manufacturer has now become an equal partner.
Interesting. You want to elaborate on
Yes,
that?
please. So just going ahead with what Aniket said, the last airplane where there was an option, of last wide body, where there was an option of 3 engine makers was the Boeing 777. The classic 777, so the 200, the 200ERs. So they would, if you buy a 200ER in period, so you get an option with a Pratt & Whitney 4000 family, usually a 4068 or a 4075. You get a Rolls-Royce Trent, or you get GE's 90 family of engines.
Okay.
And even for the competing A330 narrow body, largely it was the same. You had the option of a Pratt & Whitney, a GE, or a Rolls-Royce, and they were all broadly comparable. And then airlines would choose one or the other depending on where they have expertise in ground handling, commonality of fleets, and so on.
Maybe talk about the A380 also, which was further from there.
So in a sense, even up to the A380, even the A380 had a partnership between GE and Pratt & Whitney, and of course the Rolls-Royce Trent. So the GPW 7200 and the Trent. So in all these cases, the engine was kind of a propulsion commodity. You buy the airframe, then you separately tick a box saying which engine you want to hang under the wing.
Okay.
Now, one brutal reality of the aircraft operations side, passenger especially, is cost per available seat kilometer. And one of the dominant line items in cost is fuel. If I were to say that modern airplanes have become 25% more fuel efficient, few percentage points, 2 to 3% have been driven by airframe changes. The bulk of the 20% comes from engines becoming more efficient. So obviously, the rate of change in technology in engines has been substantially more than on the airframe side, and the engines are now 55% the cost of an entire airplane versus around 40% it used to be for legacy narrow bodies. For wide bodies, again, it's in the ballpark.
Got it.
As a result now, these are not propulsion commodities, they are developed hand in glove with the airplane. So GE, for example, is the only engine maker since the Boeing 777-300ER. You buy a 300ER, you get the GE 90-115B, or you don't buy a 777-300ER. That's it.
Okay. So are Indian companies catering now more to the engine or the frame? And as you guys see over the next 10 years, 15 years that you said the window is, where do Indian companies make the most? Because I saw a chart in your presentation which said that there is the airplane companies, then the OEMs, then tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, and Indian companies are probably at tier 3 and tier 4. It may not be a bad thing, but do Indian companies graduate, or how does this happen?
See, ultimately, one has to get into this sector in only 2 ways. One,
from an Indian investor's perspective.
no, from broadly how the sector itself came in, you have to either be the innovator who started the sector, so you have to either be a Leroy Grumman or a William Allen Boeing,
Which Indians can't be, okay.
which
right
already
now.
the sector is
Exactly.
developed, so we can't be there. So you can't come in top down. So you have to go in bottom up. So then at that point, one usually gets in at a tier 3 level where you are making subcomponents. Then you get competence on an entire family of subcomponents, assemble it together, turn it into a product, then you become a tier 2.
Which is what maybe an Azad Engineering or some of the other companies that is a Dynamatic, etc. are doing? You
Exactly.
You reckon?
They,
Okay.
they will eventually make the journey.
Okay.
They all will make the journey.
Okay.
How quickly they will make the journey is what will depend on a variety of factors,
Okay.
including and especially the promoter. So we'll
Okay.
come to that. But we will start at that tier 2, tier 3 level. And let's not forget, this has only been a 5-year journey.
Sure.
So from there, we will move to tier 2, and maybe over a period of time, a tier 1 may develop. But even the tier 1s are as old as the OEMs, so I would not hold my breath for us to become a tier 1 for the time being in our investment horizon.
We have 5 more minutes. I'm just trying to get to the crux of it. So you reckon in this 15-year journey, we'll probably hit the chance of any competent Indian company reaching those tier 1 levels, or the profit pool is good even if we don't do that?
See, the way I would think about it is we generally as human beings overestimate the near future and underestimate what is out by 10-15 years. So we cannot comment on what could happen in the next 10-15 years. What we can comment on is 2 things: risk and reliability. If you have to move up the ladder in this, or you have to move up the value chain to being tier 2 or tier 3, from tier 4 or tier 3 to tier 2 or tier 1, essentially what you need to be able to establish is a trust-based relationship with the OEM, where if you say that you will deliver a certain component in a certain time frame with certain tolerances, that has to happen each time, every time, for the foreseeable future, all the time.
And for now, it's happening.
For now, some people or some companies essentially have been able to cater to the subcomponent level in this space to that extent, and therefore the trust is being developed in the ecosystem, right? So the way we would think about it is, once this trust is established, the more complex systems, subsystems will come to Indian OEMs or Indian tier 3, tier 4 partners, who would then graduate to being full risk sharing partners with the OEMs and the tier 1s at a tier 2 level.
Okay.
So we feel that this graduation of the competence built in these organizations and companies will take place over the next 5 to 7 years. Beyond that, let's see how India is able to participate in the segment.
Now, Ravi, my question to you is, how many opportunities are there in India? Because in the listed space, for example, you guys spoke about a couple of names. There is, like I said, there is a Dynamatic, there might be a couple of others. There is a handful of companies that you can count. So is the larger opportunity in the private markets?
No, so first of all, these tier 2, 3, 4 vendors are smaller companies. Yes, they do not exist at this point of time in the listed space. But what we look for is not only the number of companies. It doesn't matter to us. Few companies is good. I mean, one good investment in this sector will be good enough for us. We are not necessarily looking to have 15 good investment in this sector.
I'm also trying to think from my viewer's perspective.
No,
how would the viewer benefit?
I understand, but for us, what matters is who has the right to win, who has the right to capitalize on that opportunity to grab that profit pool. And that is more important than how many people. In fact, the fewer people, the better, because the pie is not going to be shared by more number of people. And by design, this particular sector is going to remain concentrated. It's not going to be a very widespread sector, because there are very high entry barriers, as Aniket explained earlier. And that works in our favor, because if you find the right company and that is able to move from level tier 4 to tier 3 to tier 2, then you will see not only substantial change in the scale, but a dramatic shift in the profitability also, and with a visibility of 10, 15, 20 years. And that's what the ingredients of a great investment to us looks like. So I am not holding my breath on having 50 companies over here. 5 good will do for me.
Okay, one last question, Ravi, and that is the starting valuations, right? Every investment. I mean, ValueQuest would determine that you invest in value, but you may have been invested earlier, which is fine. Are the starting valuations for the aerospace companies currently prohibitive?
So let's take a look at, valuation is an art. We can't boil it down to a formula. So a PE ratio is not necessarily a determinant of a valuation.
So how do you guys value
You
these
should
companies?
look at it from the point of view of where we are in the trend. This is very much the beginning of a trend. The size and scale of these companies are going to change dramatically. And what we need to be very sure of the fact that these profit pools will remain protected, and this is the company that has the right to capture that profit pool. If we can determine that, and answer to that is yes, then the valuations might be a little on the higher side from a 1 year, 2 year perspective, but the moment you look beyond 5 years, I think we are only scratching the surface, and the absolute size is still too small to be worried about the earnings ratio based valuation of on a current year basis.
Okay, so Aniket, simply put, at last 60 seconds, simply put, you guys would be comfortable buying some of these companies, whichever the company may be, at a higher multiple because the runway is very long.
The way I would think about this is the phrase that Arvind and I have come up with for TriStar: Dhanda, Banda and Bhav. The
Dhanda, Banda and Bhav. Okay.
The Dhanda is excellent, as we have discussed over the last 27 odd minutes. The Banda is what is important. See, the value giver for a first-time asset is the private equity company, which is putting money into the promoter or the entrepreneur who's run a business. So we feel in this business, the biggest differentiator is going to be the promoter. You have to pick the right promoter. If you don't pick the right promoter, I think whatever valuation case that you make, it'll turn out to be an uninvestable opportunity over a long period in time. So what we say is focus on the entrepreneur in this industry, and if they have the capability to navigate the landscape or the atmosphere over a period of time, wealth creation will take place.
Okay, so धंधा और बंदा ठीक होगा तो भाव manage हो ही जाएगा, if not this year then in the future years. Okay, gentlemen, this was lovely. Thank you so much for taking the time out and being with us. And lovely note, I'll reread this and I'll watch the show all over again to understand this space better.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And the pleasure was ours. And viewers, I hope you found this as useful as I did while doing this show. Thank you so much for tuning into the yet another episode of Profit Insights.